Without objection.
Mr. President, I'm going to...
The Senate will be in order.
I'm sure all my colleagues are going to want to listen to this speech.
Yes, the Senate will be in order.
Mr. President, I'm coming to the floor with my colleagues, Senator Whitehouse and Senator Menendez, to talk about some very important legislation for our country that passed the Senate last week. It's the Save Our Seas 2.0 legislation, and I want to begin by thanking Senator Whitehouse and Senator Menendez for their leadership on this bill. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of it, why it matters to Alaska and New Jersey and Rhode Island, but the whole country. But this is a significant piece of legislation, really the most comprehensive piece of legislation to pass the Congress, pass the Senate, dealing with ocean debris, ocean pollution ever. Okay, that sounds like pretty hyperbolic phrase there, but it's true. We checked with CRS. There's been nothing more comprehensive than this piece of legislation to tackle an issue that we all care about, clean oceans. So a bipartisan group of senators, as a matter of fact, on Thursday night, 100 senators passed this after a lot of work, both in the Commerce Committee, Environment and Public Works Committee, Foreign Relations Committee, and after about a year of work on this, we finally got it passed. A number of senators, Democrats and Republicans, were co-sponsors, but I really want to thank the two senators on the floor right now. In particular, Senator Whitehouse has been a real leader on these issues dealing with oceans. And this is an environmental issue that we can solve. Environmental issue that Republicans, Democrats in the Congress, the Trump administration in the White House, environmental groups, industry groups, we're all pulling on the same oar. And so we had a good start last Thursday on what this does, but I want to turn it over to my colleague from Rhode Island, because in many ways he's been the real leader, the driver, the founder of the Oceans Caucus, and bit by bit, legislation by legislation, he and I co-sponsored the first Save Our Seas Act last Congress. The President signed it to much fanfare in the Oval Office, and you're starting to see people working on this. There's a whole section in the USMCA on cleaning up our oceans. We've gone from Save Our Seas 1, which is already passed into law, to Save Our Seas 2, and I think it's exciting. And I think the American people don't always hear about the bipartisan work on big issues that matter to our nation that's actually getting done, because there's a lot, and cleaning up our oceans is one that matters, certainly to my state, with more coastline than the rest of the lower 48 combined, but it matters to everybody. You don't even have to live in a coastal state to care about this issue. Some of our co-sponsors in this bill on both sides of the aisle are from states that don't even have any coastline. That's how important it is. So I want to turn it over to Senator Whitehouse, thank him for his and Senator Menendez's leadership. We'll talk a little bit about what's in it, what we're going to do next. But this is a good day for the environment in America, a good day for the oceans, not just in our country, not just in Alaska, not just in Rhode Island, but for the world. And if we're leading on this, which this legislation does as a nation, then we're going to be able to help clean up our oceans all over the world. And we had a good start here Thursday night in the U.S. Senate when we passed this bill legislatively, unanimously. So again, to my colleague from Rhode Island, the floor is yours.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I come to the floor today with a bunch of thank yous after Thursday evening's happy news that Save Our Seas 2.0 passed the United States Senate by unanimous consent. I want to thank all of the members in the Senate of our bipartisan Oceans Caucus. The Oceans Caucus has been a really good forum for getting these bills moving to a point where they can pass by unanimous consent. Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan's colleague from Alaska, and I set that up years ago. It's now over 40 members, very bipartisan, and it's had a really important role in moving bipartisan oceans legislation. So, Oceans Caucus, thank you. This bill, Save Our Seas 2.0, had to go through 3 committees. It had to go through Commerce, it had to go through Foreign Relations, and it had to go through Environment and Public Works. In reverse order, let me start because Senator Barrasso, the chairman of the Committee on the Environment and Public Works, is here on the Senate floor, to express my appreciation to him and my appreciation to our ranking member, Senator Carper, for having shepherded this through the committee with a unanimous committee support, and that gave it a lot of momentum to go on to Foreign Relations and to Commerce. So to my friend Senator Barrasso, thank you, sir. I do appreciate it very much. I think this is a score, a good win. A good deed was done here. Foreign Relations was also very important, and Senator Menendez, our ranking member, is about to speak, so I won't steal his thunder, but he has been an incredibly valuable part of this triumvirate, and I am extremely grateful to Senator Menendez. And the Commerce Committee, Senators Wicker and Cantwell were very helpful about making sure this got through Commerce and about helping it once it was on the floor. Most of all, though, my thanks go to Senator Sullivan of Alaska. We started down this road quite some time ago, tentatively getting into the space of ocean plastic waste with a simple hearing in the Environment Public Works Committee, which he had an essential role in making happen because there was a turf conflict between our subcommittee and EPW and the Fisheries Subcommittee in the Commerce Committee. Now, if you're not from the Senate, you think that that is all crazy talk. But if you're in the Senate, that's a really serious problem to have to resolve. We had the very good fortune that the chairman of the Fisheries Subcommittee of the Commerce Committee and the chairman of our subcommittee in the Environment Public Works Committee were both the same individual, none other than Senator Dan Sullivan. So he went out and he had a nice debate with himself and was able to negotiate a happy resolution of that turf dispute, and the hearing went forward. Without that, it never would have happened. So that was the opening bid. Then we got to 1.0, which admittedly was not a very big bill, but it was going to test the proposition, was the Senate willing to legislate on marine plastic waste? And yes, we got a big, booming 100-vote support for that in the Senate. And Senator Sullivan was so happy with that outcome that we immediately went to work on crafting 2.0, which, as Senator Sullivan has pointed out, is not just a beachhead. This is significant marine plastic waste legislation. And it will push the administration to do a lot more. More than half of the waste in the oceans comes from 5 Asian countries. More than 80% of the waste in the ocean comes from 10 rivers in Asia and Africa. This is a solvable problem if we direct attention and resources and solutions to that problem. So I'm really looking forward to following up on that. I'm really looking forward to getting right to work on Save Our Seas 3.0, because we're not done here. There's a lot of plastic mess out there to clean up, and there's a lot of energy around getting even more done. So to Senator Sullivan, my great appreciation. And I'll close, if I may, with one unlikely thank you, and that is, as Senator Sullivan mentioned, it reminded me, there are senators who supported this who don't even have coasts. They're from those square-edged states in the middle of the country who don't have coasts. One of them, who's been very important to this, has been Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma. Now, on climate change, Senator Inhofe and I are at each other's throats pretty much all the time. We are always having fights about climate change. I call him a climate denier, he calls me a climate alarmist, and we go back and forth fighting about climate change. But on this, he has been an essential ally, and having his support has sent, I think, a terrific signal into the Senate that, hey, if Senator Whitehouse and Senator Inhofe can agree on this, there's room for me in there somewhere. And so a final thank you to Senator Inhofe of Alaska, but the biggest thank you, of course, is to Senator Sullivan, who really made this happen. And with that, I'll yield so that my colleague and friend, Senator Menendez, who's been so important to this, can add his thoughts.
Mr. President.
Senators recognized.
Mr. President, it's a pleasure to join Senators Whitehouse and Sullivan on the floor today to thank our colleagues for passing the legislation that we've all co-authored to combat the environmental crisis of plastic waste in our oceans. Our partnership represents both the geographic and political urgency behind this growing crisis. Save Our Seas 2.0 is a multifaceted effort that will help the United States better prevent plastic pollution, respond to marine debris emergencies, and leverage U.S. foreign policy and international engagement to prevent and clean up foreign sources of plastic pollution. We have a responsibility to protect the health of the world's oceans, which regulate our climate, produce half of the Earth's oxygen supply, and provide food to 2.6 billion people worldwide. The environmental health of our world depends on healthy oceans, and plastic pollution and marine debris are like cholesterol, clogging global ecosystems in countless ways. The reality is that plastic waste in our ocean knows no borders. What may be a plastic wrapper flowing down a river in China today could be microplastic in your tuna salad tomorrow. So let me thank Senators Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse has been so much engaged in our oceans since his coming to the Senate, well, even before that, but certainly a leader in the Senate, and Senator Sullivan for their longstanding bipartisan leadership on this issue and cooperation on the bill. I was happy to have supported the original Save Our Seas Act in the 115th Congress. Last year, when several international news stories exposed the tragic environmental impacts of plastic on our marine environment, I began working on legislation to enhance U.S. international engagement on this truly global crisis, which served as the basis for Title II of our bill. At the time, I was not immediately aware that Senators Sullivan and Whitehouse were planning a second act, so to speak, and I dearly appreciate being part of the Save Our Seas team. I also want to thank Chairman Risch for supporting and advancing the international components of this bill through the Foreign Relations Committee, as well as all of the chairs and rankings that have already been mentioned. I think that the advancing three component parts of the bill through all of these respective committees, which is no small feat, and the 20 bipartisan co-sponsors shows the Senate broad support for action on plastic waste. New Jerseyans know all too well the threat by plastic pollution. Our pristine beaches attract millions of people to the Jersey Shore each year, and our coastal waters support everything from fishing and recreation to the flow of trade to our ports and harbors. No one wants to swim in plastic or eat fish that fed on microplastic. That's why 25 New Jersey townships have passed local ordinances banning or phasing down disposable plastic products, and another 26 may soon join them. There's also legislation pending in the New Jersey State Legislature to limit the proliferation of disposable plastics in New Jersey's economy. With 40% of Americans living in coastal communities, my constituents back home are far from the only ones grappling with the hazards of plastic pollution in our oceans. There's no question we still have work to do as our bill heads to the House. I look forward to continuing these efforts with Senator Whitehouse and Sullivan and our co-sponsors as we engage House leaders to act on the bill this year. So again, thank you to my colleagues. It's good. I know it doesn't always get the headlines. The essence of a good story seems to be conflict, not cooperation. But I'm thrilled to be part of cooperation that can make a difference in the lives not just of our oceans, but our families. And with that, I yield back.
Well, I want to thank Senator Menendez and Senator Whitehouse again on their leadership on this. You know, we've all seen the pictures, the news stories. The side, it creates a Marine Debris Foundation. That's a congressionally chartered private organization. Think of groups that matter to Americans. There's, dozens of these kind of foundations, but they're important. They send a signal that the Congress of the United States cares about these things. Think about the Red Cross, the American Legion, the National Parks Foundations. These are all congressionally chartered organizations that the new Marine Debris Foundation will be one of them. That the American government is focused on this. It's an opportunity for the private sector, and we've seen some industry step up. There's a group called the Alliance to End Plastic Waste that has pledged $1.5 billion to start addressing this problem. That is not small change. It's going to need that kind of money. Perhaps some of that can go into this foundation. There's an innovation prize. A lot of focus in our bill on innovation, because if we can solve some of the big challenges in chemistry, a plastic bottle that could fully biodegrade, we don't have that yet. But these are some of the things that the bill looks at doing. Of course, Senator Menendez talked about the very substantial foreign relations component, because so much of the plastic waste in the oceans comes from countries in Asia and Africa, 10 rivers, estimating almost 80 to 90% of all the plastic waste in all the oceans. So again, it's solvable because it's definable. And then the third component, Mr. President, is improving domestic infrastructure to prevent marine debris through new grants, foreign studies for waste management, mitigation. So this covers a lot of different areas: innovation, our domestic side, the international side, and we have momentum. We had a great group of bipartisan senators, Democrats, Republicans, from all over the country, from all political persuasions, showing that momentum. We have the Trump administration fully behind this. In many ways, some of their federal agencies weighed in significantly to help us design this legislation. And now we need to get it over to the House and move it in the House soon and get it to the President's desk. So this is a good day for the oceans, a good day for bipartisan success in the U.S. Senate on an issue that people care about. People really care about making sure we have clean oceans, and we're making progress. So I just want to leave it at that, and I'll ask my colleague from Rhode Island, who's been the real leader on this issue, to wrap it.
Delighted to close this out, again thanking Senator Sullivan. I think there's reason to hope for a really good appropriations subcommittee hearing on this subject in the coming year. I think there's reason to hope for another EPW committee hearing, full committee hearing on marine plastics. I expect those things will happen. That will help us with our progress. And one of the things I've come to admire about Senator Sullivan is that as a colonel in the United States Marines, he sets himself a mission, and then he goes about it with real vigor. And one of the missions that he set himself was to make sure that the Trump administration followed up on what Save Our Seas 1.0 did. There were a lot of doors that were knocked on that had their hinges rattled by Senator Sullivan. There were a lot of administration officials who probably had to hold the phone an inch or so away from their ears because Senator Sullivan was trying to get their attention on this subject. Having seen him in action on Save Our Seas 1.0, I very much look forward, Senator Sullivan, to watching you in action on Save Our Seas 2.0 to make sure that its promise, its legislative promise, is fully realized in executive implementation. And with that, I yield the floor.
Another White House signing of this